Good evening. Welcome to Poets Corner at Scarritt Bennett Center in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Donna Patterson, the Anamkara chaplain in residence here, and I am delighted this evening to welcome both Ashley Mintz and Gwendolyn Mintz. I'm going to tell you just a bit about them. You're going to be delighted with their energy and with their reading tonight. Ashley is a visual artist and writer creating and residing in Nashville, Tennessee. Mintz began her creative journey when she moved to Nashville to pursue songwriting. Composing and recording her own instrumental music, Mintz has had original music used in independent and short films and a play. Mintz began doing abstract drawings and paintings and has since had her art exhibited in galleries, hotels, boutiques, community centers, and cafes, among other places. She has also had her art in the background of 2 films. As a writer of poetry and song lyrics, Ashley often incorporates writing into her paintings and also exhibits poetry and lyrics alongside her paintings. Mintz has been invited to read her poetry and perform music at different art festivals. She regularly teaches her art and writing techniques in art journaling and mixed media art workshops in a way to help others cultivate their creativity and to use art as a way of healing. Gwendolyn Joyce Mintz is an award-winning writer. Her poems and stories have appeared in various journals and anthologies, as well as on coffee can labels. Want to hear more about that? She began writing short plays a few years ago and has had 2 10-minute and 2 1-minute plays produced. Colored Girl is her 3rd chapbook. Her previous books were Mother Love and Where I'll Be If I'm Not There. She's currently working on a book about Black girls and the juvenile justice system. She also takes pictures and makes teddy bears. I want you to welcome this mother and daughter duo, Ashley and Gwendolyn Mintz.
Thank you. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I'm glad to be here with my mom. I haven't seen her in a while, so I'm glad that she was able to come to Nashville to do this reading. And so I'm going to start with a few pieces, and then I'll turn it over to her. So my first piece is called More Courage Than Me. I used to keep fire on my tongue and barbed wire around my heart, and my words lingered around the windows and doors, those fighting words like invisible bars that I must have been counting on, but not to keep anyone from coming in. And on the walls by where you used to move, they lacked the darkness of your shadows, once dancing and laughing, then quiet and slow moving. Now another kind of darkness remains. Now only echoes of memories, phantom footsteps, and then that still silence that rings in my ears since the winter you left. Right, left, right, left. Right to where you remembered that there was a door, and you walked right through it. You walked away, no longer on eggshells. Okay, and the next piece. Okay, so the next 2 pieces are like shorter pieces. And the first one, it's called Warriors. There's like a stereotype I feel about like women of color, but particularly Black women, like the angry Black woman. And I feel like women of color get more like, I don't know how to explain it. Let's see. Like when they get angry about something, there always seems to be more of an issue with it. So I wrote this in response to that. So it's called Warriors. Angry Black woman, you call her. because her anger brings up things that you are afraid to feel, but her silence won't shield you from yourself. Yes, she's angry. Maybe you are too. And loud, yes, sometimes. And she should be, because warriors never win by tiptoeing lightly in the shadows. And then this next one is called Cells. And I wrote this because someone that I knew who was like in and out of prison, I remember one time they got a cell phone and they kind of weren't familiar with technology because they'd been locked up for so long. And I thought that like struck me as kind of odd, but it made sense because they didn't have access to it. But it just made me notice the difference of everyone being able to have like technology at their fingertips and just easily be able to use it, and this person didn't know how to use it. But so it's called Cells. He gets out and he doesn't know how to use a cell phone. And it's not just because of the brain cells he's killed with each hit. He's always behind, missing out as technology excels, because the only cells he is familiar with are the ones with bars and the cells that got him there. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this one is called Glass. And I actually wrote this several years ago, shortly after I moved here to Nashville. And I remember seeing a homeless man on the street and he was drinking. And so that was the inspiration for this. So Glass. My feet just missed it. The broken bottle on the damp street, wet from last night's storm or his tears. And as the water disappears, so will his headache. I imagine it's that man I see downtown sometimes. Brown skin, calluses on his fingers, hardened by a lifetime of work. Eyes far off somewhere, recalling a fine memory or many tragedies. Heart in shards like that bottle, such rage as he hurls it. Forget the world has changed. No more name calling, no spitting on him for being a color he didn't choose. Yes, the world has changed, but he doesn't know how to change with it. It's too late and he doesn't know how to relate. And he is just like that glass. Everyone who comes near him avoids him, wondering who will come by and clean him up. Let's see how I'm doing on time. Okay. Okay, so this one's called Remember. That's the name of one of your plays, right? Mm-hmm. I wrote this first, though. Doesn't he copy you? No, just kidding. Okay. Remember. And this was actually like years ago, it was a literary journal at Vanderbilt. They had like a call for writing and art too, but I just submitted writing. And it was based on like time and death. So this one's called Remember. Sometimes I wonder when the earth will decide it's my turn to line up underneath it next to other bone-ridden boxes. Or will I be ashes, freed from some loved one's hands, writhing with the wind, fighting to mix in with the dirt and waters, a final vow to be part of it all, even in death? If I write my will that further prepare me? Will the tangible things I leave behind mean more than the risks I was willing to take? And what would my sister choose to remember me by? This piano I will leave her, or the songs we used to sing? Okay. All right. This next piece, it's kind of like a weird title, but it like has meaning to me, but it's like kind of long, but it's called Gallivanting Reduces Equaled Growth but there's something about the letters in each word. I don't want to give too much away because it's about someone. Yeah, bad memories, but but yeah, it's like kind of a weird title, but okay. The taste of your words was sweet, or was it my twisting them, changing their order to make them fit like missing pieces that would complete my puzzling reality? I try to make our past seem not as bad, so you could be the hero in my present and save me. But you've got others waiting, and lately you only mirror what I am afraid of facing. And just before we shatter, I step back from the cracks, threatening to scatter the parts of us that were once intact. You and I, these beautiful, ugly beings, I turn away from what I am seeing and let the smoke rise, burning every red flag waving in my favor, because love cannot wait until later. I need it now, like an unwritten song needs a creator, like two enemies need a mediator. You feed me crumbs that sadly I savor, while you move back and forth and coast to coast to find life and to await her and her and her. Tell me, do puppets always dance? Because, well, sometimes I tiptoe lightly so that the strings will not make extra creases in your fingers and disfigure your hands. You may need them whole one day in case you ever decide to hold mine. Okay, and this next piece is called Black on Black. And so recently I did like an online, it was almost kind of like it was like a presentation with an organization that deals with a lot of artists in the South. And so I got to like present art and read poetry. And a lot of people were kind of like, why is she writing about like black on black crime when, you know, there's cops killing black people unarmed? And but like one person understood what I was saying. And so in this piece, like what I'm talking about is that there's like psychological ramifications for someone constantly seeing like someone who looks like them being shot and killed, like without, you know, like all these officers are doing this and they're not getting prosecuted properly or anything like that. And there's just, I feel like it's psychological when there's like younger kids who are black killing other black kids because they see this on TV. And I believe that they start to think of themselves perhaps and others who look like them as almost like disposable because of the way that it's shown on TV. So I hope that makes sense, but I'll read it maybe. But yeah, so one person understood it though, like, and I was like, thank you, you got it. But yeah, so I'm looking at like the psychological aspect of it. So this is called Black on Black. Black man shot by police. Another black man shot by police. Another black man shot. Another black man. Another black. It sinks into your subconscious until you start to believe that black bodies like yours are disposable. They make you believe it because the youth is impressionable, and it's all you see. And no one planted the seed that would make you challenge that belief. And now when you look in the mirror, there stands another black man. And when another black man disrespects you, your anger puts you in a state of unrest because it's an emotion you never learned to express. So you go with what you did learn. Another black man shot. He mirrors the innocence that you forgot. He mirrors the part of yourself that you learned to hate, and so you pull the trigger to relieve that weight. But maybe that is their plan, to get you to do the job, to kill two beautiful birds with one stone. Him 6 feet under, and you 25 to life, and now all alone. I'm on my last piece. Let's see, I'm gonna check the time. Okay, we're good on time. Okay, so this one's called Mirror. I'm actually gonna take this one. Oh, I stuck it on. Okay. Oh no, I shouldn't have stuck that on because it's two sides. Okay, so this one's called Mirror. And this is actually about my grandma, my mom's mom. And so with our generations, like there's, I think in a lot of like black families, there's a lot of different skin tones. But with ours, it's like grandma, like my great grandma, her grandma, like,
Grandma.
huh?
I said my grandma.
Yeah, that's what I said. So like she's like darker skin, and then your mom, my grandma, was lighter skin, and then it's like so darker skin, lighter skin, like the skin tones, yeah. So my grandma, so she was lighter skin. I think she was probably a little bit darker than me, but I think that my grandma had a lot of issues, and one of the issues I realized that she had was with her own skin tone, and I think she was like her siblings. Was she like the only wasn't she like the only lighter one?
Yes. I thought my mother was white when I was growing up because she was so much lighter than everybody.
Yeah, because I remember when I met like her siblings, like
Yeah, they're all dark.
yeah, and okay. So I think that she probably dealt with a lot being like lighter, especially in the time that she grew up in. So, and then she had Alzheimer's or dementia. Is it the same?
No, she had dementia.
Dementia.
And then also a diagnosis of Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if they were the same. I learned something new. Okay. So, but this is about kind of my growing up with her, and then my experience with her, and how I think a lot of the way that she was, like the way that she treated me particularly, was due to like projection and things that she hadn't dealt with in her own life that she went through, and then how it felt when she was diagnosed with okay, so I don't want to give too much away till the end. Okay, so this is called Mirror. Her name is Rosie, but my grandpa called her Rose. Some of my family used to joke and call us twins because as I got older, I began to resemble the way that she looked when she was younger. I never saw it, but I didn't deny it either. I thought she was beautiful. My grandmother, with her yellow-toned skin and brownish red hair like autumn leaves changing, was always changing. A laugh could quickly turn into angry words, rolling off of her tongue like a flame or a ball of fire, catching your skin and eating it right down to your heart. Projection, I'm guessing, from a lifetime of rejection. Maybe I got it worse because I was like a direct reflection, reminding her of a history she thought she left, and maybe it hurt because she never got the lesson. Not enough tears fell for the scars to lessen. To the white kids who spit on her from school buses as she walked to school, she was too black. To her family and friends always teasing her, she was too light, and with the changing times, she thought that I had it easier. But things weren't always bad between me and her. I still remember those early Sunday mornings when I watched her put on blue eyeliner and red lipstick as we got ready for church. One day she started showing me how to do the same, and almost every Sunday morning we were late. Over the years, I slowly began to grow into my own, mixed with pieces of each generation before me. I became myself by taking the parts of my grandmother that were so deeply ingrained in me that weren't working and left them where my tears fell. And she and I became a little more free. Oh my gosh. Sorry, my throat's like. Okay. It was the good memories that I decided to keep. Who are you? My grandmother asked me one day. My own grandmother. This woman I have known all of my life and who I lived with for more than half of it. We stared at each other in equal confusion, but for different reasons. Who am I? I'm Ashley, I told her. My mouth stopped, but my heart kept on. I'm the one who you taught about makeup, the one who you used to let go through your piles of makeup, scattered in drawers like I was searching for treasure, letting me take whatever I wanted. The one whose good grades you were proud of. It's me, your oldest granddaughter. But even then, not even the tears seeping from my heart, Not even my hopeful energy would mend whatever it was that fell apart in her memory. Born to her own daughter, I still became more like a long-lost friend who she would try to recall, but would never remember again. I was a stranger. Still, I looked in her eyes, hoping that she would see me and remember her twin. I kept looking, even after it was clear that she wouldn't. Because if she didn't remember me, she might remember herself in this mirror I was trying to create. She might remember who she was, and that would have been enough for me. Okay. Thanks. If there needs to be more dialogue too, we can. I was just saying that because I was like, I'm just going to read. And then when you were just saying about, I didn't know that about.
Well, you can't actually say someone else Alzheimer's until they're dead. You can only find out from the branch. They can give an initial. They probably have Alzheimer's.
Well, I was saying I didn't know that you thought she was white.
Oh, yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
You thought that.
I thought she was white because she was lighter than me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was white.
Well, I didn't know I was black until I was like, or part black. No, really, I didn't know until I was like 7. I don't know if I ever told you this, but so I grew up with the black side of my family.
Confession time.
Compassion hour. I'm just kidding. No, but I just wanted to, like, I didn't know. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I really didn't know because, you know, like kids don't know, like we don't think about like race and stuff. And so I grew up with the black side of my family, and I had no idea, like, because I just didn't think about it until one time you went to pick me up from school, and then the next day, one of my classmates, and this would have been, what, like 2nd grade or something, and one of my classmates was like, "Why are you white and your mom's black?" And I was like, "What?" Like, but he wasn't saying it like,
right.
to, you know, because we were friends like later on, but it was just like an observation. And then I never thought about it before. My mom's black, what? Okay. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. Because I really didn't know that about you thinking she was white. Okay. So I'm glad we could talk about race so freely. Okay. Yeah, to the book.
So, the book Ashley and I did together is called Colored Girl, and it's the 3rd or 4th time we collaborated. When Ashley was a child, she used to write poems, and she would write poems, and my older son drew, and so I was going to put their work on labels for my bear business. So that was the first time we collaborated. The second time, I had seen a picture that Ashley had done that does appear in this book, and I just thought it was an amazing picture. And then a magazine was taking collaborations, and so I matched that picture, which I can't find at the moment, with a short story, this one, with this picture. It got rejected, but I still have it with my story superimposed on the artwork because I really like it, and the story went great with the picture. So my second chapbook won the Wing City chapbook contest, and the editor wrote me and asked me who I might have any ideas about artwork, because we needed to talk about artwork, and I'm like, well, I know an artist that I'd like to work with, and so I sent her to Ashley's page, and she looked at some things, and she sent me back pieces she thought would go well with the book, and so Ashley did the cover for my second chapbook, Where I'll Be If I'm Not There. So after that, Ashley asked me if we could do a book where we matched my stories with her artwork. And she sent me a lot of artwork, and I started going through it and seeing if I had stories that would fit the theme. When I was a young mother, and I bounced in and out of my parents' house. So Ashley and I sort of have like the same mother. And so I think that's a common thing in our work because she grew up in the same kind of atmosphere that I grew up in. So some pictures I rejected because they sort of didn't fit the theme of the stories. And this was one of the pictures Ashley had sent. And I thought it was going to be a great cover. And she told me it was called Colored Girl. And you explained right that it was because it was full of colored.
Yeah,
right.
It's like tongue in cheek because I don't actually like that term. That's not like
right.
Not but I felt like the all the colors on there represent. It says like there's more to me than even though like skin color is a part. I believe that like physically it's it's a part, like our physical appearance is a part of us. But I feel like so many people judge, especially people judge us and by how we look, and that was just a way to say like there's so many more colors and facets to my personality and just different things on the inside. So.
And the book is dedicated to my mother and my grandmother and all the colored girls in the world. Both my mother and my grandmother had difficult times. They were in Texas. They grew up and lived in Texas. And so I wanted to I like the title as Colored Girl because the stories and some of the work have to do with not necessarily colored girls, but women who have lived under a society that when they've been termed colored girls. So that's where that came from. Mm-hmm. So the first poem I'm going to read is based on my experiences, and it's called How to Be a Black Girl in America. Get used to being called out your name. You are a heifer, a black bitch, a nappy-headed hoe. Say nothing when people pet your head. Smile and don't be angry. No, not that. When they do it without asking. Shrug because you have no explanation why your hair grows that way. Laugh when you buy that Cosmetic Ferns book on black women and beauty, and it offers you tips on making your full lips look thinner. Excuse those hands on your ass and never call it abuse what those boys passing you in the hall did. A modern day Hottentot, how could their touch not be fascinated? And don't question why your natural is only beautiful when it's bought by a white girl. Don't be insulted when your teacher pulls you, the only black student, outside before class begins to find out who wrote the first essay you turned in. I have to ask, but only you. Pretend you don't know why that guy in algebra keeps singing Nights in White Satin. Meet your white boyfriend's mother. Act like you didn't overhear her whisper, at least she's clean. Don't let your education, your degrees, your talents make you uppity. Understand that you are the bottom of the totem. Girl, just don't get crushed by all that weight. Now, another poem that's in the book is called Stitches. And it is about my grandmother.
This is one of my favorites, by the way.
When I was going to get married, you gave me a quilt, the wedding ring, but the links were doubled. You had pieced and sewn it by hand, and it was beautiful, meant to grace my marriage bed. I thought you'd change your mind when I changed mine, but you let me keep it anyway, maybe one day. Your work was always on display at the county fair. The state recognized you as a contemporary traditional quilt maker, and your quilts hung in the Palace of the Governors, a magazine article and a splash of fame in the life of a maid. Later, when I worked for the Smithsonian, I offered your name for the Folk Life program. The local coordinator was surprised. Rosie Brooks is your grandmother, he asked, and I smiled big, proud to say yes, so proud. I only wanted to learn the bear claw, So much a little girl collecting plush and porcelain. The other names meant nothing to me. The log cabin, strip, flower baskets. A breeches quilt was what your family, poor, black, and in Texas, made to keep warm. Old breeches were always saved, your daddy's and your brother's. But I only wanted to learn the bear claw, and I didn't want anything made from leftovers. Before you forgot who I was, you gave me all the quilt tops you had. Of 10 grandchildren, only I loved to sew. I dropped by a quilt shop once, bought muslin, but not the batting. You kept asking, and I made excuses. Later, when you left the hospital, in those days of your dying, I would tell you how I was finally making progress. I even promised to bring you a quilt for your medical bed in your daughter's house. Yes, I lied, but I didn't care because talking of quilts made you smile. Almost Christmas, a year after your death, at a craft show, a woman stands and watches me stitching a bear by hand. She asks if I ever prick myself and goes on to share how hand quilters often leave blood, drops of their blood in the seams. Later at home, I unpack the quilt tops, lay them across the living room floor. On my knees, I search the stitches for that which also flows through my veins. Search for what I need in order to do what you have entrusted to me and finish it all. I'm going to just read some short fiction pieces. This one is called Weathering. He didn't know any better, so he wore it, and just as proud as anybody, that garbage bag his mama borrowed from a neighbor, waking up and finding it raining and him without a raincoat. And it would always be so because there was always something else needed. And anyway, he died in his 8th year because not only didn't he own a raincoat, he didn't own a jacket, and certainly not one that was bulletproof. But that day he didn't care. He was happy to be dry, just like everyone else. Sometimes. She wanted to keep believing in him, but sometimes it was hard. When she couldn't sleep because she was afraid, it got so dark, and then she kept checking the candle, her finger to her mouth, to the wick, and then checking again for the slightest flicker, or the baby cried and cried with a fervor that wouldn't be doused by water, little in the cabinets or in her, and sometimes the landlord would corner her, press himself against her still swollen belly, and say, maybe it was time they talked about the rent. Figures. She kept figures all season, even made herself a pad, torn pieces of paper held secure by straight pins from the sewing kit to keep those numbers on. Her daddy couldn't make head or tails out of what she'd written, but he understood those figures said that they didn't owe this season. Didn't owe. He wanted to believe her neat little numbers. Every season before, he'd gone to the Graham house to settle his debts, only to find another season of his life owing. But she received such good grades in arithmetic, the teacher praised her. Why, she added as quick as one of them machines. Didn't owe. His daughter's voice had just enough lilt to intoxicate him. Maybe he surprised her with a new dress. Maybe he'd take her out for ice cream. Could you do that so late in the season? He didn't know, never having money he could spend how he wanted. She had numbers for everything. Before, they'd never known what Cotton was going for, but that girl of his with a good head had good ears as well, and all season she listened. She knew what the gin was paying a bell, even knew how many pounds of cotton it took to make one. But her figures weren't based on that. She was smart enough to know that Mr. Graham wouldn't give no nigger the same as a white man, so she lowered the price, cut it in half, and increased the pounds needed. But even then, they expected to profit something. A fine little bookkeeper you got there, he imagined Graham saying as the two men compared their figures. Could see himself explaining, as his daughter had said, that's what I overseed. This here's what the food bill over the commissary. The number of bales of cotton we made this year times how much a bale is sold for. What we made minus this here, what we owe. Yes, sir, everything accounted for. He patted the pad in his shirt pocket and smiled as he joined the line of sharecroppers. When it was his turn, he stepped forward to the table where Mr. Graham sat. Graham smiled at him. You did good this season, he said. Makes a difference when you got your girl out there helping. Graham consulted the ledger before him. Made your crop. Didn't owe. Looks like we're even, Graham said. The man's hand flew to his shirt pocket and retrieved his little pad. It trembled in his hand. What you got there, Graham asked. The sharecropper stared at his daughter's figures, then glanced over and compared them to the wild, illegible figures in the open ledger next to the gun. It's a list, things my wife wanted once we settled. Well, go on over to the commissary. Tell Mr. Johnson you're starting next season's bill. And here, Graham said, holding out a dollar bill, get that daughter of yours something for the fine work she did this season. She waited for him on the porch, but he strode past his daughter, pausing only to yank that pad from his pocket, ripping it apart before he stomped into the house, leaving her trembling beneath the pieces of paper falling all around her. What are we doing for time?
7:37.
I like to write a lot about race because it really has been, and most likely will always be an issue in the United States. And I was reading the newspaper, the New York Times, and I read this story, and immediately a voice said, tell a story. And so I gave an explanation, and I said, no, that's not what it's gonna be. I have a degree in journalism, and I said, I'm gonna write a news story, and then I'm gonna somehow put this woman's story in here. So here we go. This one is called Slave Journey Comes, it's called Hush Child, Shh. So the title of the newspaper article is Slave Journey Comes to a Close, October 3rd and 4th, 2003. New York. Amid tears and joy, speech and song, the skeletal remains of 419 slaves were reinterred in the African burial ground in Lower Manhattan. A 3-hour ceremony in New York concluded the rites of ancestral return, commemorating the colonial African heritage, a series of vigils and ceremonies that took place in these cities prior. Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Baltimore, Wilmington, Delaware, and Newark, New Jersey. In May 1991, the United States General Services Administration began preliminary work for a federal office tower at Broadway and Duane Streets, and the former gravesite, stretching 5 acres, was unearthed. The land had been allocated to the city's black population, some free, most enslaved in the late 1600s when even cemeteries were segregated. As the city expanded its boundaries, it appropriated the land and closed the cemetery. With the passage of time, the original intent of the land became memory until the excavation more than a decade ago. I knew we wouldn't always be forgotten. Slavery thrived in New York until 1827, when the state abolished it. Until then, New York City rivaled Charleston, South Carolina as a slave trading center. Enslaved Africans made up about 40% of the Dutch colony New Amsterdam, arriving around 1626 as they were promised to would-be settlers. These same slaves built the first streets of the city, the first public buildings, Trinity Church and the wall from which Wall Street derives its name that kept the colony safe from invasion. The slaves are believed to be one of the first commodities sold in the area, which Mayor Michael Bloomberg called a painful landmark. The skeletons of 4 bodies, a man, a woman, a girl, a boy, symbolic of the estimated 20,000 that were buried, moved from city to city for the events, coordinated by Harlem Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture and the General Services Administration. In Newark, the mahogany coffins, which had been handcrafted in Ghana and decorated with African tribal symbols and village scenes, were anointed with oil and sent off with traditional hymns and chanting. They were delivered by motorboat to South Street Seaport by the New Jersey State Police. Hush, child, why are you crying? Hush now, shh, no need for it. This passage looks easy. Rolling waters to cross, but no whips, no chains. Feels like a memory, but I think we're safe in this vessel. The coffins were carried by a horse-drawn hearse, accompanied by dozens, including Bloomberg. To the tune of Just a Closer Walk with Thee, the procession made its way through the Canyon of Heroes to the burial site. 4 horse-drawn wagons followed, bearing the remains of the 415 others. The clop, 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 that noise? Wow, child, that's just the horses moving. And ain't that something new? I ain't never got to ride before. The procession prepared the final return of the remains, which had been at Howard University in Washington since 1993, being examined by a team of biological anthropologists led by Michael Blakely. The findings indicate, as reported by the chief anthropologist, that slaves lived under conditions that ultimately kill. Forensic evidence showed that many had been forced to carry loads between 40 to 80 kilograms, about 88 to 176 pounds. Wasn't nothing compared to the loads we carried in our hearts. Blakely stated these people were obviously working at the very margins of human endurance and capacity. Arguably, a few were worked to death in a time when it was considered cost-effective to work slaves to death. Even some 6-year-old children showed signs of being worked in what we would consider today an extreme way. Other conclusions indicate that about 50% of the colonial Africans in New York died by age 12, and about 40% of the skeletons found, which belonged to pre-adolescent children, showed signs of malnutrition, scurvy, rickets, and anemia. An estimated 30 to 40% found died in infancy. Oh yes, we died young and early. My mama used to say we'd have to work hard, but we wouldn't have to work long. The ceremony at which Bloomberg welcomed the slaves was punctuated by cries and suggestions of reparations. Now, ain't that something? Over 300 years and you think somebody would have learned something. Looks like they don't know either. You can't put a price on a soul. The Reverend Herbert Daughtry first mentioned it. New York, he said, would not be if not for the labor of slaves. It was time to pay up, he stated, adding, they owe us. Now who's supposed to pay? And who they gonna pay? The guilty parties and the innocent ones are all dead now. Best thing would be to go on. Just go on and be thankful for the change, even if it was a long time coming. Lord, children, be grateful for the written words and the chance to raise your babies and the time to rest. Can't never be any real justice, but there can be a moving on. An overnight vigil brought the service to a close, and the remains of the 419 colonial slaves were placed in 7 massive crypts, which were sealed and reburied. Listen, you hear that rhythm calling? You hear those drums? I'm gonna hush now, child. Shh. I think we're going home.
I remember that one too.
How much time?
7:44.
What do we do now? Do I read something?
Yeah. Oh, that yeah. I mean, do you have something else?
I do.
Okay, yeah. We just do improv, freestyle. Yeah, we're doing good on time.
This one is called Johnny Girl. The baby was named after the daddy. A pen in my hand, poised over the affidavit of birth, I told my sister, that child is not a boy. She then told me to tag girl onto the name. That way the Johnnies will know which one I'm talking to. I shook my head with slow disappointment and wrote, Johnny Girl grew up hard-headed like her daddy, but she wasn't a hot tail like her mama said. She was just lonely. And what could you expect growing up in that mess they called a family? I hoped my sister would be like me and not have children unless she could do better than what we had. But she seemed to choose worse. When Johnny Girl ended up pregnant, no one was surprised. I couldn't bear the thought of her baby getting swallowed up, so when Johnny Girl found that she and her son needed somewhere to go, I let them come stay with me. I loved her because she was blood, but I'd long since given up trying to help her repair hurts and avoid new ones. If a person's determined to go down the wrong road, sometimes you just got to get out of the car and let them be on their journey. The boy was hungry. I knew that, but I wasn't going to feed him. Be like giving a skinny cat a reason to keep creeping up on your porch. Hey, Johnny Girl, I called until she came dragging out of her bedroom. What you want, she asked with a growl as she wiped Friday night from her eyes. He's hungry. I nodded over to her son at the kitchen table. You sitting right there. Wouldn't kill you to give him something. Wouldn't kill you either. She pulled a cup from the cabinet, poured some of the coffee I made, and took a long drink. Why you always gotta act like a hag to me? You never help. I gave you somewhere to live. Sometimes I think I'd rather live in the woods and listen to you nagging. I can help you pack and loan you a tent, but first you feed Cedric. She yanked the cabinet door open and pulled out a bowl, another cabinet, a box of cereal. When she pulled open the utensil drawer, I was sure knives, forks, and spoons would end up splattered on the floor. They didn't. She dropped the bowl in front of him and shook wheat puffs into it. My heart ached at her roughness. The way she acted like caring for her own child was more than she should have to do. And she only had to do it 2 days. Now, I said I wouldn't feed him, but that was only on the weekends. I fixed him his meals during the week, made sure he had breakfast, a good lunch, and a hot dinner. Many a lesson my sister and I couldn't hear over grumbling bellies. At night, I checked his homework, drew his bath, and helped him pick out the next day's clothes. I didn't want anyone official poking around us, and Cedric, I believe, could be saved. He was smart, and I was counting on education to be the way he moved past his mama. I already had the milk out, so I poured some into his bowl. I smiled at him. He smiled back and shoved a spoonful of cereal into his mouth. I looked up to meet Johnny's glare. She didn't like it when I made her start her day doing right by him, but I didn't care. I got what I wanted, and so did he. After work, the first thing I did when I got home was to plop down on the closest chair, took off my shoes and rubbed my feet. When they stopped throbbing, I leaned back and closed my eyes. I was enjoying the quiet until it was interrupted by a pair of feet shuffling up the hall. You seen Cedric? Johnny Girl asked. I just got in. Her feet scruffed a path to the front door. She pulled it open and called his name, again and louder. When she got no response after a few moments, she shut the door hard and then dropped on the couch. She let out an angry sigh. That boy is asking for something, she said, if he stopped somewhere to play. Nothing wrong with the boy playing on a Saturday afternoon. I didn't ask you. I opened my eyes and sat up. Johnny's eyes were daggers. How she rolled them without slicing up her lids was a mystery to me. He better get back here with my cigarettes and my change. She heaved herself off the couch. She went to the cabinet, got a bag of chips she hadn't bought, and headed back to her room. I got up minutes later and made my way to the shower, then to my bedroom to take a nap. I hadn't slept long, not quite an hour had passed. I went into the kitchen to see about dinner. Johnny Girl was sitting on the couch, arms crossed at her chest. The TV was on, and though her eyes were looking in its direction, she wasn't involved in the show playing. Did you make something for y'all to eat? He ain't here yet. I frowned and went out on the front porch. My eyes scanned the area. Then I went back inside. You sent him over to Junior's? He'd sell anything to anyone. Yeah. You're going to go out looking for him at his friend's house or something? I don't know who he plays with. That shouldn't be. I pulled out the fixing for a sandwich. After I made it, I sat at the table and thanked the Lord for many things. Asked for one. Johnny girl turned off the TV. What do I do? I took some bites and chewed while I thought. First, we'll go out Junior's way, see if anyone's seen him. I got up and threw the sandwich away. Wasn't a bit of flavor to it. I picked my keys off the hook by the front door. Actually, you stay here in case when he comes back, I told her. It wouldn't do no good to tell her what she needed to do in regard to that boy. I hurried out to the car. The outside light was on when I got back. I could see Johnny girl standing in the doorway. The screen door flew open wide as I pulled up and she rushed outside. She stopped on the porch steps as I got out of the car. I hoped she'd tell me that he was home, but she just stood there, her eyes on the passenger side of the car, as if that might make him appear. I sighed. I'd gone to Junior's, but he said Cedric had been there hours before. I'd driven around, questioned some children nearby, went to see the pastor and asked him to make some calls. Time was moving on. It was almost 10 o'clock when I finally picked up the phone to call the police. They came, gathered a description and a picture of him. Are you going to start looking? Johnny girl asked. We'll keep an eye out for him, the officer said. Not the same thing. Johnny girl sat down on the couch. I ain't going to be mad at him when he gets back, she told me. Fear can make you do right, and when Cedric got home, I could see his mama being more attentive like she'd been at first. My mind envisioned her sitting on the couch, going over his homework, complimenting him on his good grades, encouraging him to push on and be that lawyer, that doctor, that businessman. He's smart, yes he is. He's going to find his way home, back here to us. I felt buoyed by her words. He's all right, I said with finality. I continued to wander the living room, then finally sat down. But fear, wearing its heaviest boots, plotted against my heart. The way she was sitting there, arms wrapped tight around her trembling body like she was trying to keep herself from being pieces thrown across the floor, made me more nervous. I jumped up and strode down the hall. I returned and got a glass of water from the kitchen. I couldn't stand to see her looking sad and afraid. And two, I wanted to slap her. I offered sleeping pills to Johnny girl. You go rest and I'll keep watch. Thank you, Auntie. She walked out of the room. I was stilled by the lack of malice in her voice. It touched something tender in me. Lord, please. Morning came with a pounding at the door. I jumped up from the chair where I'd fallen asleep. A neighbor stood on the porch, moving from foot to foot. We found him, Ellie, he told me. My eyes zoomed around the front, then landed back on him. Can you follow me, he said. I stumbled back into the house, walked down to the hall to Johnny's room to rouse her. She was still in the clothes she wore yesterday, as was I, so we were ready to go. We didn't speak, couldn't, as we made our way around that truck down a dirt road, dust billowing before us to the riverbank. Johnny girl sprung from the car before I even stopped completely. Two men stood waist high in the water, a body floating before them. Johnny's screams tore the morning open as her legs sliced a path through the water. I stood in the space between the open door and the car, pressed my eyes shut. When I opened them, Johnny girl was coming out of the water with him draped in her arms, his head dangling. I couldn't bear that image. I turned away. That boy was the last baby I'd birthed. It had been a long labor, but not difficult. I remember a sweet bubble of hope for this new generation swelling within me. Johnny's girl's face had been aglow with what I thought was the same hope. She'd been amazed at the way his small hand fit in her palm. And when she snuggled him to her breast, she held him like a religious person holding something sacred and holy. She'd held him like that.
That was heavy. I was like holding my breath. Yeah. Okay, so it's 7:55. So I was watching like for questions. There was one from your friends from New Mexico. I think they'd asked if it was being recorded or something. Right? Yeah. Being asked if this is being recorded, Gwendolyn's friends in New Mexico would like to know. And the answer is yes, it will be available on Scarritt's Facebook page as well as YouTube in HD. And then I don't know if there would be any other ones on Facebook or YouTube, yeah. Oh yeah, YouTube, I forget. Or even anyone here.
Will y'all be signing books after you have books over there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Selling as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We'll be signing and selling.
Signing and selling. Yeah, and for anyone watching on Facebook or YouTube, I'll have books on. So there's some on Etsy, and the shop is called Wild Enemy, and then there's some on there. They will be available on my website too, and it's ashleymintz.weebly.com. So it's ASHLEYMINTZ.WEEBLY.com.
I just want to say thank you for your sharing and the vulnerability that you share, both of you, in laying that out the way you did.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the space to do that. It's like race is such a touchy subject, and I feel like a lot of people are afraid to discuss it or listen to it, like listen to people talk about it. So I appreciate like allowing us to come and read our stuff here.
Yes, I would like to thank you and thank Ashley for inviting me to be a part of this.
Yes.
Come back to
Thank you
Nashville for a moment.
Yeah, I'm glad that you came by because it has been too long. And honestly, like my mom's one of my biggest inspirations, like with writing. And remember, you used to have me read your stuff when I went to live with you when I was like 16. She'd be like, "Read this. Does this make sense?" So, but like also your writing, like reading that, like I feel like a lot of your stuff has like twists at the end, and I always like that. And I like that your writing is raw, and you know what I mean, like it's real. It's it just tells the truth about so many things, and that always inspired me.
See if I can sell her book.
Maybe I'll buy 2. Just kidding. Okay.
Any other questions?
No questions, just compliments. Like, I just love, my mom is like my best friend, and I can see that you all's relationship is really close as well, so it's just really great to see that. And the conversation and the subject is, like you said, it's just raw, and it's great to hear that. And you have described me as like a person of color, a female of color,
Mm-hmm.
to be open about certain things, so thank you.
Yep. Thanks. Thank you for coming by and listening to us.
We're frenemies.
Frenemies. What?
Frenemies.
Thank you.
Thank you.